Have you ever woken up after 65 and felt like your body was already tired before the day even began? That question hit me hard one morning when I stood up from bed and felt my legs heavy, my balance uncertain, and a strange stiffness that hadn't been there years before. I remember thinking, this can't just be age. Something in my routine was quietly working against me. For a long time, I ignored those signs. I told myself, everyone slows down after a certain age. I believed that as long as I walked a little later in the day, everything would be fine. But what scared me wasn't the stiffness itself, it was how normal it started to feel. Each morning, my body took longer to respond. My steps felt cautious. My confidence was lower before breakfast than it had been the night before. And deep down, I felt a fear I never said out loud. What if this is how independence starts to fade? What I didn't realize back then was that the first hour after waking is when the body over 65 is most vulnerable and most adaptable. Circulation is slower. Joints are less responsive. Balance systems are still offline. And if you do nothing, your body interprets that as a signal to stay weak, stay slow, stay guarded. I was sending that signal every single morning without knowing it. I started noticing small warnings. My legs felt heavier when I walked to the kitchen. I held onto furniture without thinking. I hesitated before bending the ita. These weren't dramatic problems, but they were consistent. And consistency is how decline sneaks in. That's when it hit me. It wasn't one bad habit ruining my health. It was the absence of a specific habit that my body was begging for. The turning point came when I asked myself a simple but uncomfortable question. What if my mornings are training my body to age faster? That question changed everything. Because once I saw my mornings not as neutral, but as powerful instructions to my body, I knew I had to experiment carefully, safely, and realistically. What I discovered next wasn't intense exercise, medication, or anything extreme. It was a small morning habit that spoke directly to circulation, balance, and control, the exact things I was afraid of losing. And once I felt what happened in my body after just a few days, I realized why so many people over 65 feel like their decline starts at dawn. Before I go on, let me pause here for a second because this part is important. If what I just described feels familiar, if you've noticed those same quiet signs in your own mornings, then this video isn't just information. It's a chance to understand what your body is asking from you right now. I want you to really pay attention to this, not just listen passively. Understanding how your body changes after 65, especially in the morning, is what allows you to stay in control instead of reacting too late. That's why I read the comments so carefully. When you write what you're experiencing, it forces you to reflect, and reflection is the first step to real change. So take a moment and tell me in the comments, how do you feel when you first wake up? Heavy legs, stiffness, low balance, or maybe you feel fine for now. Write it down, it matters more than you think. And if this is making sense to you so far, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Not as a favor to me, but because this kind of functional, realistic guidance is exactly what most people over 65 never hear until it's too late. Staying connected means you don't miss the next piece of this story. Because in the next part, I'm going to show you the exact morning habit. I tested the one that began changing how my body felt before breakfast. Before walking, before the day even started. 4 years, I believed I was doing everything right. I walked almost every day. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes later, but walking was my safety net. Everyone told me it was enough. Doctors, friends, even articles aimed at people my age repeated the same message. Just keep walking. And for a long time, I didn't question it. But something didn't add up. Even on the days I walked, my mornings still felt fragile. My legs felt heavy before the walk even began. My first steps were cautious, almost negotiated. I noticed that walking didn't wake my body up, it just moved it forward. My circulation still felt slow. My balance felt hesitant. And the strange part was this. The more I relied on walking alone, the more exposed I felt during the rest of the day. What I began to understand is that after 65, the problem isn't movement, it's preparation. Walking assumes your body is already ready. It assumes your joints are responsive, your balance system is alert, your blood flow is active. But in the morning, that simply isn't true anymore. Circulation is sluggish. The small stabilizing muscles are asleep. Your nervous system hasn't fully connected yet. Walking doesn't fix that. It demands that it's already fixed. I remember one morning clearly. I went out for my usual walk, and halfway through, I felt unsteady on a slight change in the sidewalk. Nothing dramatic happened, but the fear did. That quick thought, what if I had fallen, stayed with me longer than the walk itself. And that's when it hit me. Walking was improving endurance, but it wasn't protecting confidence. Another thing I noticed was how my legs felt afterward. Tired, yes, but not. Lighter. Not more alive. The heaviness would return by midday. The stiffness came back after sitting. That told me something important. My circulation wasn't being fully activated. The deeper flow, the kind that keeps legs warm, responsive, and reliable, wasn't being addressed. Walking is forward, repetitive, predictable. Aging bodies need something different first, something that tells the brain and the legs, you are safe, you are stable, you are in control. Without that signal, walking becomes just motion, not protection. That realization forced me to stop asking, am I moving enough? And start asking a better question. What kind of movement does my body need before it can move well at all? That question led me to experiment with a simple morning habit that didn't replace walking. It prepared my body for it. And what I felt in my legs within days was something walking alone had never given me. What I tested next wasn't intense, and it definitely wasn't what most people imagine when they hear the word exercise. In fact, that's exactly why I trusted it. I needed something my body would accept first thing in the morning. Not fight against, something that spoke directly to circulation, balance, and control before my feet ever left the house. I started doing this habit within minutes of waking, before coffee, before breakfast, before checking the news. The goal wasn't to sweat or push. The goal was to wake up my legs and nervous system on purpose. And the first thing I noticed, even in the first few days, was warmth. My feet felt warmer. My calves felt more alive. That dull, heavy sensation I used to feel at the sink was softer, less dominant. What surprised me most was how quickly my balance responded. Standing felt different. I wasn't rushing to grab the counter anymore. My body felt organized, like it knew where it was in space again. That's when I realized how much of aging is actually delayed communication between the brain and the legs. Not weakness alone, but hesitation. Within the first week, my mornings felt calmer. Not emotionally, physically. I moved with less caution. My first steps were quieter, smoother, and here's the part that really caught my attention. The effect didn't disappear after an hour. It followed me through the day. Walking felt easier, not because I was stronger, but because my body was already prepared to move. This habit didn't exhaust me. It didn't leave me sore. Instead, it created a subtle but powerful shift in circulation. Blood flow reached areas that used to feel asleep until midday. My legs didn't swell as easily. Sitting no longer felt like a reset back to stiffness. That told me something important was happening under the surface. What I was doing wasn't forcing change, it was inviting it. And for a body over 65, that difference matters. When movement feels safe, the body responds faster. When balance feels controlled, confidence follows. And when circulation improves early, everything that comes after works better. The most interesting part is that this habit took only a few minutes. No equipment, no floor work, no rushing, just intentional movement designed to tell my body, you're awake now. You're stable. You're ready. And once I felt that, I had to understand why it worked so well, especially after 65, and why skipping this window in the morning quietly accelerates decline for so many people. What I learned next completely changed how I see aging. After 65, the body doesn't wake up all at once. It wakes up in layers, and some of those layers stay offline unless you deliberately activate them. Circulation is slower because gravity hasn't helped blood move yet. Joints feel stiff because synovial fluid hasn't started flowing. And balance is fragile because the nervous system hasn't fully synced the brain with the legs. This is why mornings become dangerous without anyone talking about it. Not dramatic danger, quiet danger. The kind where people slip in the kitchen, miss a step, lose confidence without falling. Every time that happens, the body learns caution instead of control. And caution, repeated daily, becomes limitation. I realized that when I used to wake up and do nothing for my body, no preparation, no signal, I was unintentionally teaching it to stay guarded. The muscles responsible for stability weren't getting a message. The small blood vessels in the legs stayed sluggish, and the balance system stayed passive. That's not aging. That's untrained mornings. What shocked me is how fast this compounds. One slow morning becomes another, then another. Soon, the body expects stiffness. It expects hesitation, and once expectation sets in, decline accelerates quietly. You don't lose independence all at once. You lose it in inches. This is also why walking alone doesn't solve the problem. Walking assumes readiness. But after 65, readiness must be created first. The body needs reassurance before it needs distance. It needs this. Circulation before endurance. It needs balance before speed. Once I understood that, everything clicked. The habit I discovered worked because it targeted the exact systems that go offline overnight. It wasn't about strength. It was about reactivating communication, blood flow, joint response, balance signals, early enough to protect the rest of the day. And here's the part most people never hear. When you skip this step long enough, your body stops expecting stability. That's when fear creeps in. Fear of falling. Fear of moving fast. Fear of being alone. I felt that fear before I understood it. But once I began respecting what my body actually needs in the morning, something shifted. I stopped fighting stiffness later because it stopped forming so deeply in the first place. My day didn't feel like recovery anymore. It felt like continuity. That's when I knew this habit wasn't just helping me feel better. It was quietly protecting my independence, one morning at a time. One of my biggest fears before committing to this habit was consistency. I knew myself well enough to know that some mornings I would feel strong, and others I would feel slow, stiff, or simply unmotivated. After 65, that fluctuation is real, and I didn't want a habit that only worked on good days. I needed something flexible enough to meet my body where it was. So I stopped treating the habit like a rule and started treating it like a conversation with my body. On good mornings, when my legs felt responsive, I moved a little more deliberately. I focused on control, smoothness, and balance. I let my circulation build gradually, feeling warmth rise from my feet upward. Those days felt empowering, but they weren't the most important ones. The real breakthrough came on the bad mornings. The mornings when my legs felt heavy, when balance felt uncertain, when I wanted to skip everything and sit down immediately. Instead of forcing myself, I shortened the habit. I slowed it down. Sometimes I did half of what I normally did. Sometimes I simply stood and moved gently, just enough to send a signal, I'm still here. I'm still in control. And something interesting happened. Even on those low-energy mornings, the habit worked. Not dramatically, but reliably. My legs didn't suddenly feel strong, but they felt awake. My balance didn't feel perfect, but it felt present. That was enough, because consistency doesn't come from intensity. It comes from permission. I also learned that this habit didn't need a perfect setting. I did it in the kitchen, in the bedroom, even next to the bed on days I felt uncertain. No special clothes, no equipment, no pressure to perform. That simplicity removed resistance, and removing resistance is what made the habit stick. Over time, I noticed something subtle but powerful. My bad days became less intense, my recovery was faster, and my good days became more frequent without me chasing them. That's when I understood the real value of this habit. It wasn't about pushing my limits. It was about protecting my baseline. When a habit adapts to you instead of demanding from you, your body stops resisting change. It starts trusting it. And that trust is what allowed this small morning practice to become part of my life instead of another routine I eventually abandoned. I didn't notice the biggest changes all at once. They showed up quietly, in moments I used to take for granted. One afternoon, I stood up from a chair and realized I hadn't braced myself. No hands on the armrest. No pause to check my balance. My body simply responded. That's when I understood something important was changing beneath the surface. Walking felt different too. Not faster, not longer, just more confident. My steps felt placed, not cautious. I wasn't scanning the ground as much. I wasn't adjusting my posture every few seconds. The habit I had started in the morning was still echoing in my body hours later, like a system that stayed online. Instead of shutting down after breakfast, another sign was how my legs felt in the evening. They used to feel heavy, almost swollen, especially after sitting. That sensation didn't disappear completely, but it softened. When I stood up after dinner, my legs responded instead of complaining. That told me circulation wasn't just being activated, it was being maintained. What surprised me most was my posture. I stood taller without trying. My shoulders felt balanced over my hips. That stability didn't come from strength training or stretching. It came from better communication between my brain and my lower body. When balance improves, posture follows naturally. Even my fear changed. I didn't think about falling as much. Not because I became reckless, but because my body stopped sending warning signals all day long. Fear often comes from uncertainty. When your body feels predictable, your mind relaxes. These were not dramatic victories. No one would have noticed them from the outside. But for me, they meant everything. They meant I was moving through the day instead of managing it. They meant I wasn't recovering from mornings anymore. I was building on them. That's when I realized this habit wasn't just a morning ritual. It was a form of protection that extended into every movement I made. And once I saw that, I started thinking about it differently. Not as something I do, but as something I invest in. At some point, I stopped thinking about this habit as something temporary or experimental. It became something deeper. I began to see it as a quiet decision I make every morning about the kind of future I want to live in. After 65, time stops being abstract. You don't measure life only in years anymore. You measure it in ability. I asked myself a hard question. How many of my future years do I want to live relying on others? And how many do I want to live standing up, walking confidently, making my own choices without fear? That's when it became clear that this habit wasn't about feeling good today. It was about protecting tomorrow. What most people don't realize is that independence isn't lost in old age because of one big event. It's lost through thousands of small concessions. Grabbing furniture, avoiding uneven ground, sitting longer because standing feels uncertain. Each concession seems harmless, but together they slowly shrink your world. This habit interrupted that process. By investing a few minutes every morning into circulation, balance, and control, I was expanding my margin of safety. I was giving my body more room to adapt, more resilience when something unexpected happened. That margin is what keeps people living independently longer. I also began to understand the power of accumulation. One morning doesn't change your life, but hundreds of mornings do. Each day I showed my body that movement is safe, balance is available, and circulation matters. Over time, my body stopped resisting age and started cooperating with it. This is what longevity really means to me now. Not chasing youth. Not pretending nothing has changed, but working with my body in a way that respects its new rules. Simple actions. Consistent signals. Small habits that quietly stack up into years of quality life. That's why I no longer skip this habit, even on busy days. Because every morning I practice it, I'm not just starting my day, I'm reinforcing my future. If you stayed with me until here, it tells me something important about you. It tells me you care about staying in control of your body, not just adding years to your life, but protecting your independence inside those years. And that matters more than anything after 65. If this message connected with you, I want you to do 3 simple things. First, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, not for me, but because everything I share here is built for people who want realistic, functional ways to keep moving, balancing, and living on their own for as long as possible. Second, if you found value in this, leave a like. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it, but don't even know what to search for yet. And finally, leave a comment and write this exact phrase: I choose independence. That comment isn't just for the algorithm. It's a statement to yourself that you're taking your mornings and your future seriously. Now, look at the screen and watch the next video that's appearing right now. It builds directly on what we talked about today and shows another simple way to protect your circulation and balance when walking alone is no longer enough. I'll see you there.